Well, we're getting ready for a heat wave as we recap the NXT before NXT heat wave. I am your professor, and it's time for the NXT post show.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Women's Wrestling Talk, the #1 women's wrestling network on the planet.
Happy Wednesday, good people. I hope you are well. My name is Gerard Bonner. They call me the professor or various and sundry names, but we're not going to get into all of those because we don't have time. What we do have time for is the NXT post show as we are getting you ready for NXT Heatwave, which goes down this coming Sunday. So what would happen as we are on the road to Heatwave? That's what we're going to talk about right now. And I am not alone. The boss lady is here. Ladies and gentlemen, TK Trinidad. How are you, TK?
I am well traveled.
Well traveled. That's a very appropriate adjective. Well traveled.
Well
How you
traveled.
feeling after all this traveling you're doing?
I am extremely tired. It's a good tired, but yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting, but I'm blessed. We'll keep the positive. Keep it in the positive.
Yes, you are, and your travel will be continuing, and so we're glad that we got you on a stop on your road to Heatwave. And so, with that said, let's dig into a great episode of NXT. Again, it took place last night, and it kicked off hot. I mean, yes, it is absolutely hot. It kicked off with a street fight for a battle that's really been raging. It started, of course, on the socials. It made its way into NXT Battleground during the 6-woman ladder match for the North American Championship, and it has spilled over from there. I'm talking about a battle between Jada Parker and Mi Chin. This was physical, and they did some things that I don't recall seeing too many women on WWE television do. They pulled out the toolbox. They started using tools on each other's fingers. Literally nuts and bolts got involved. It was wild. TK, what did you think about this crazy match to open up this episode of NXT?
It's like when people call, who was that? Oh, that's me. When people call wrestling fake and you literally see thumbtacks being pulled out. Like,
yeah,
I don't know how much money you can pay me to say, hey, to land on some thumbtacks. Like, you need to put some respect on these wrestlers' names because the stuff that they do is bar none. Like, and then sometimes the vitriol and hate or the ignorant tweets that some of these wrestlers get, and you see all the work that they put in, is just, they're sacrificing their body for our entertainment, and that's not fake.
Right. It's not. And when you consider, again, there's no easy way to go through a wall. There's no, I mean, there's no soft way to do it. And the wall doesn't have to be concrete. A wall is a wall, and the force of somebody's body on live TV putting you through that wall, you don't get multiple opportunities to do that, And so when they literally brought out the nuts and bolts, I've never seen that used before, men or women. And if you step on a Lego, it hurts. If you get backdropped on a bunch of nuts and bolts, that doesn't feel good, which is on top of a chair as well. Yeah. There's no way to soften those blows. These women put it all on the line, not for a title at all, but simply because they didn't like each other. What a match. What a battle. And the end result, Jada Parker gets the win, continuing to show why she is the tough girl of NXT.
It's so funny. So yesterday, and we'll talk about, tune into WWT a lot because we're going to be talking about where the professor and I disappeared to over the last couple of days, but I was talking to somebody about NXT, and they're a wrestling fan, but they don't watch it like we watch it. Mm-hmm. And he specifically brought up Miss Parker. He's like, yeah, NXT don't look like the NXT of back in the day. Like the women are bodying. I was like, well, you know their names, right? He's like, yeah, well then they're doing their job. Because if the random person who doesn't really watch the product is aware of Miss Parker,
right?
Like, what's happening?
And this also just goes to show the reach of NXT, which is far different than the NXT of old, you know. Yep. And the ironic part is the NXT that was the heyday, the black and gold era that so many people talk about, was filled with a lot of independent stars. What's wild about this iteration of NXT is that you have legitimately new stars, people who have not even been in the indies. It's their first time wrestling, and they are the ones that are getting the attention, whether it's a Trick Williams or a Lash Legend or a Jada Parker. You know, we're looking at people who've never been on the indies before. This is their first tackle at wrestling. And so it's pretty exciting to see that, again, what some have called developmental is creating new stars for people in the mainstream marketplace to know. So what a great way to start off this show.
And then also, too, another thing, the fact that Meechim, I mean, a lot of us are aware that she's had a whole indie career before she even came to WWE. And now we get to see almost like a hybrid of NXT where we're seeing people like Natalya and Shayna Baszler like come down. But it's not like they're obviously teaching in the behind the scenes, but they're making the matches so good that if somebody were to watch the match, they're not going to think, oh, well, she just started. She's been in the game for 20 years. And that's the beautiful thing of like NXT. You're mixing it up with matches that we might not see if we wait for somebody to come up from NXT to the main roster. So you're getting these matches that like you don't even know that you wanted to see it. And I'm here for it.
Exactly. We love to see it. Boza is in the building. He says, saw photos online on Friday's Level Up. Ren Sinclair welcomes Tyra May Steele to next NXT Level Up. Yeah. And we'll probably get into some of that maybe on WWT Live. Tamara Myra Mensa stock. And it's just kind of cool to see, again, this pipeline of new stars being created in NXT. And so, yeah, very physical matches you can see there. That kendo stick, which I love this shot because the kendo stick is literally wrapping itself around the back and arm of Jada Parker. And you can see Meechin is swinging for her life. It's crazy to see. Moving forward, we had a tag team match. Hank and Tank taking on the New Catch Republic. And I have to be careful because it's very easy to confuse the names of the New Catch Republic and the New Quarter Catch Club. Yeah, try that. But this is a great example of what you were just mentioning in terms of relative newcomers, that being Hank and Tank, battling experienced veterans like a Pete Dunne and a Tyler Bate. You know, they challenged them last week, and now we end up getting this match. And it was a really, really solid match. The favorites, of course, were Tyler Bate and Pete Dunne, who did come away with the win. But I thought it was a very strong showing for Hank and Tank as well. What did you think of this one?
I mean, I definitely don't want to know the backstory. I mean, Hank and Tank, like what the backstory to their names are. But definitely great showing. And I think we talked about the last time we did the NXT show together. Like, gone are the days where it's like, oh, these are two big guys. We're never going to see them go off the top rope. And we saw just that. And so it was a great match. But in this particular matchup, I definitely thought, now you have me thinking which catch we're talking about. Definitely thought New Catch. I definitely thought New Catch was going to take the win. Was going to take the win, but they had some really, really great spots. I think it was, and I didn't make the reference as far as who was Hank and who was Tank. I didn't have time to kind of really dive into it, but I believe it was Hank that went off the top rope.
Yeah, Hank is left and Tank is on the right.
Yeah, but I mean, you can see that in the picture, but when they're wrestling, it's still. But you know, it was 5 o'clock in the morning when I watched it, so there's that.
Fair enough.
But yeah, I mean, again, great show and great match. And I believe this was their opening match, right? There's this very first match on NXT.
No, the first match was the match we just talked about, which was the Lord, it was the street fight. That was the first match.
No. I believe Hank and Tank's first.
Oh no, Hank and Tank. No, they've been on before. They've been on before. They were battling before. Lord, I can't remember the team. It was a new team that they battled before. So they've been on NXT television.
Do we both have jet lag? Because it's not like we do to be lagging like this.
I know. Listen, we were working, and you guys will find out how much work we did at WWT Live, but we were working for sure. But yeah, it's not the first time that Hank and Tank have been on as a tag team. The interesting story about Hank, he initially was a security guard who became a wrestler, and then Tank is one of the first members of the first NIL class. So it's kind of cool to see they came together, you know, and they're kind of goofy and things like that, but it works. And they're one of those young tag teams that, you know, with some time will potentially become a tag team that we'll be talking about in the future for sure.
Oh, I definitely could see that.
Yeah, so a great match and a great showing. And again, kind of the point of this match, even going into it, when Hank and Tank challenged New Catch last week, was to say, we want to test our skills. So they didn't necessarily walk into this match expecting to win, but they wanted to see how good they were measuring up against a team like New Catch Republic. And I thought they did a fantastic job. Now then, we get to the ever-growing, incredibly deep women's division. And so you've got Brynlee Reed taking on Izzy Dame. And again, Izzy Dame has really been kind of stepping up after kind of being the diesel to the Shawn Michaels that was Kiana James. Kiana James, of course, getting called up to Raw. So Izzy Dame now really stepping out on her own. Brynlee Reese is still finding her way. She's kind of been the motivator for Idris and Inofe, and trying to get those guys together, but in her own right, trying to find her way. And it was a very physical matchup for sure that saw Izzy Dame get the win. What were your thoughts on this one?
I like Wrestling Honey. First off, I don't know why you're in the chat when you can be on the show. That's one.
She'll be on for WWT Live, I'm sure.
I'm just saying. Anyways, I concur with Honey as far as Izzy left no crumbs on this match. It was a really, really great match. I honestly think, in having a few conversations in the location that we were at recently, that when people reference NXT, and no shade to the guys, I think when they reference NXT, it's like the women's roster and Trick Williams. I think that's kind of the totality of NXT, and the women are just coming out strong. Like this picture itself, like somebody who's like an old head, like, that's not my W from yesterday. All these women have like a thickness in a good way, meaning muscle, and it's not the stereotypical muscle. It's just my body in motion. So it was a really, really great, entertaining match.
This is also a real testament to how WWE is recruiting now versus then. Then, which we could literally say is 20 years ago, when they actually had the public divas search, and they were literally looking for models and people who weren't necessarily the most athletic to become WWE divas. Now you've got the NIL program, and they're looking for athletes. And so all of the women in this iteration of NXT all are collegiate athletes that we're looking at. You know, Izzy Dame with a strong history there in volleyball, Brynlee Reese, a strong history in both volleyball and cheerleading. Like, and these are traceable kinds of history as well. So it explains the power that you're seeing. You know, and again, shout out to Vic Joseph and Booker T on commentary. And one of the great points that Vic Joseph made about Izzy Dame is that when she spiked a volleyball, it clocked in at 60 miles an hour. That's some serious power to be able to do that. And if you look at her frame, she very much has a volleyball frame, that tall, strong frame that can jump and can hit with a lot of power. And so her wrestling acumen really details that and showcases that, which again shows that, again, the women's division is not monolithic in any way, shape, or form. There are lots of ways to present women in wrestling, and I think this is a great, great picture of that. So shout out to Brynlee Reese and Izzy Dame, one of several fantastic women's matches on this episode of NXT. And with that said, I'm sure that if a certain mayor is joining us for WWT Live, we will not hear the end of this. It was a championship face-off as the champion Roxanne Perez went face-to-face with Lola Vice, and they just began talking about kind of what to expect for next week's title match. And we learned a lot about Lola Vice in this one, as Lola Vice got on the mic and she started sharing a story about her mom, how her mom was pregnant with her. And, you know, then her mom,
while she was getting her black belt, it wasn't like her mom was just.
Right. She was getting her black belt and finding out she's pregnant. And then while Lola is training for the Olympics, her mom gets sick. She has to end training. She picks up MMA, is in MSG by 20. She is in tears. What did you think about this, particularly on the heels of last week, where you had Oro Mensah with his very powerful story that kind of choked Booker T up? What are your thoughts on Lola Vice sharing this side of herself right before this title match?
I mean, I can't believe that I'm even saying this, but the mayor, I could almost envision the mayor like in the back, like pepping, like, look, like, you know, like, look, you got this, you did all these things. Like, I could see it, like, since he's part of the family. I mean, maybe they had this discussion. But I mean, I do like the way she did share the story. It was kind of, I almost wanted Roxanne to be a little bit more of an a-hole, because it's like, and she did, but I think she could have got a little bit further, where it's like, yeah, well, good for you, but I'm and she said all of that, but I think she could have had a little bit more edge and more bite, so the audience would hate her even more, because that's like one of those things where, you know, you ask, there's another terrible analogy. You're asking somebody to do something for you, right? But now they're giving you all these excuses or the reasons why they can't, and in your mind, it's like, I really don't care about your problems. Like, I asked you to do something. Like, just, you know, I mean, that's what I think in my mind when, you know, people, and this is what I think to myself when I try to start giving people excuses, like, people don't care. So it's like, it's great. And I'm not saying I don't care. It was a very powerful story, but in the grand scheme of the story, I feel like Roxanne could have went a little bit more like, yeah, that's great. Shout out to your mom. Like, I'm glad she's still alive. That type of thing. Like, one of those things where it's like more edgy.
There's a part of me, just based on Roxanne's reaction, that wondered if she didn't know that was coming, because I
thought that too.
Because I expected also for her to have this really just catty kind of response, and I feel like she responded and then she caught herself and was like, okay, yeah, let me be mean and evil again. But she was very moved by that, which I think is one of those things that kind of humanizes Lola Vice, which could be good, could be bad. But I think what it definitely did was it endeared a lot of people to her and automatically made them love her, even if they didn't coming into this. And I think that's
Right.
kind of the challenge when you have two people who come into this. They're both heels, and so you expect both of them to get booed. Somebody's got to get cheered. And so
Right.
this was one of those moments that I think allowed Lola to do that. And then she tacked on something at the end that I went, oh, this is amazing. When she came at the end and she was like, and I'm going to be the first Cuban American NXT women's champion. And I was like, way to throw in representation. And I don't know, but for me, representation of all types is a win. And so I'm here for this for her. And it's definitely going to make Heatwave a very, very interesting moment. We'll get into possible predictions a little bit later, but I thought this was, again, a strong showing for Lola. It got a lot of people, I think, amped. And then, of course, she knocked out one of the security guards, which again showed how powerful that back fist is. I think we're going to have ourselves a really strong match.
That was crazy because you know what I thought of? I thought Rick Ross's security guard up in Canada. I was like, these security guards are just taking shots. Like they're not secured. They're not securing properly these days. Like I don't know what school they're going to, but whatever school they're coming from as of late is not. They need their money back because it's not mapping.
Yeah, it really, really isn't. Honey says, I was surprised at Lola's vulnerability. Quite a moving story. It did kind of come out of nowhere, but the timing of it couldn't have been better because, you know, in terms of, one of the challenges I think of a go-home show like this is when so much of the story between these two have already been told, the question becomes, what's left to do? And here we got an interesting side that really, really worked really well. Boza says, if people were still upset that it's not Julia versus Roxanne, Lola did a great job of selling you on why she will be the NXT Women's Champion on Sunday. I think Lola did such a great job that no one was even thinking about Julia at this particular point, which I think, again, is part of what Lola's job is to do. She's had a great ride coming out of NXT Battleground, winning that underground match, and then turning around and selling herself as a legitimate number one contender who could really take out Roxanne. And I think this is going to be great. Boza says, I can't believe I'm saying this, but it wouldn't shock me if the mayor flew up to Toronto and was in Lola's corner to guide her to victory over Roxanne. You know what? Stranger things have happened, and we know how the mayor rolls.
Let me send it. Put it back up. Let me send it to the mayor. We'll see. I mean, if he's really part of the family, I mean,
they might even have preparations and accommodations already made for him.
That part.
Who knows? Who knows?
That's crazy.
Let's see. Win or lose, Lola Vice truly arrived last Tuesday, and she has great presence on the mic. I totally agree with that. Cousin Ron, good to see you, says Roxanne looked genuinely stunned. She definitely did. And the security ain't securing, boss. Yeah, I agree. They definitely are not.
So that was but get your money back.
So from there, we had a singles match involving Oro Mensah taking on Miles Bourne. Miles Bourne, of course, of the No Quarter Catch crew. And we got to see, again, the power of this storytelling, now that we know that all four members of Metaphor won't be here because the leader is injured and he's out for a while, that being Noam Dar. So Oro Mensah is stepping up, and of course the rest of Metaphor was out with him. Big match against Miles Bourne. And for those who don't know, if you are watching NXT and you might wonder why they have to call Miles' name or they might have to, get his attention, it's because he is deaf. And so they do get his attention by, hitting the ring or what kinds of those kinds of things, which is one of the things that happened in that match last night. As they were trying to get his attention to use the brass knucks, he felt like he didn't need them. It ended up costing him the match, and Oro Mensah ends up winning this one. What did you think of this match, TK?
I mean, I love the dynamic And I feel like this is gonna set up like beyond. I just noticed the spider web. Sorry guys. I haven't been here in a while. Beyond the pay-per-view that's happening this Sunday, I feel like the summer is going to be really great, in particular for storylines for NXT, and they have a lot of storylines going. And I feel like sometimes when we talk about storylines, when we're doing WWT Live, and when we do Ring of Honor and TNA, and we're saying, well, you can't have too many storylines and all this other stuff. I think NXT is doing a really great job as far as the majority of people that are on that roster have storylines going. Like it's almost like a really great multiverse. And I think this should be an example for other promotions, that you can have all these storylines going and still be operational and still make sense. We as human beings are not that dumb. And I think NXT is doing a really great job with this, and I can't wait to see where this is going to progress to.
Yeah, I think this is one of those moments where, obviously they did not plan for Noam Dar to be out, but with him being out, metaphor gets to continue, and we get to see again the creation of another star, in this case, Oro Mensah, and seeing how, he has the backing of Jakara Jackson and Lash Legend. This has a chance to really become something really, really cool. And I'm excited to see that happening for him. All the while, the story that's being told over there with the No Quarter Catch crew, they've got a new member in Tavian Heights. Meanwhile, there's some friction that's happening there as well. And so you're right. We can handle multiple stories in a particular television show as long as the stories are continuing to make sense. And that's something that we are seeing in NXT. So speaking of stories making sense, Wendy Chu has awoken from her sleep, and it feels like a massive nightmare. And last night she took on Carly Bright. And let's just say what Wendy Chu is doing these days, she's a problem. She dominated that match. And I think this is another interesting character arc in the women's division of NXT. What did you think of this match between Wendy Chu and Carly Bright?
Like, I think I've been saying this for years. Like, it's one of those things where I wish they would do a story as far as behind the scenes, because what a spin off of, what she was doing before to what she's doing now, which is the same thing, just turned dark. And, at first I was like, I don't know how this is going to play out. But then it's like I'm really buying into it. And now it's actually even making me more curious, because there's so many different ways that you can go with this. And again, as far as summer and storylines, this is going to be a problem from the women's locker room. And I'm curious as to, it's kind of like almost when Bray was dominating as far as character wise. He was taking a lot of losses. We all know that, but dominating as far as character wise to like certain individuals, like you can definitely put Wendy Chu with anybody in the locker room and create a whole story that's going to take a while to play out. So I'm really excited about how this is gonna go. But I don't want to be in the room with her. That's one thing.
Listen, if I have to have a roommate somewhere, it cannot be her.
Yes, go forward, Wendy. Go forward.
Please pass me all the way. Do you hear me? But I think this also shows how great of a job this version of NXT is doing in terms of pivoting. To take a character that was created in 2.0 and realize that this isn't necessarily that space anymore, and allow a darker side. And again, because this is not a concept that's being overdone in NXT, it really, really works, So we're really kind of the only bit of darkness we have in WWE right now, of course, is Wyatt Six. In the NXT world, having her in this space, it's amazing. And it does some really, really cool things. That's great, honey. It does some really, really cool things. So I'm intrigued, because I think a case is being made at some point for her to continue to run through the roster and find herself staring at a potential title opportunity down the road. And it's going to be interesting to see how that works and how champions try to take her on. Another women's match. I promise you, this is not WoW, folks. This is NXT, and there are plenty of women's matches to talk about. Jasmine Nix taking on Carmen Petrovich. Another great showcase of two amazing talents. And again, these are relatively new talents, and I say relatively new. Neither of them have really spent any time, of course, on the indies. More products of the NIL recruitment type of situation. What were your thoughts on this match between Jasmine Nix and Carmen Petrovich?
I didn't know. Actually, two superstars I'm finding out like tidbits of information as far as commonality. So I didn't know Carmen was from Toronto. So you know, I always love repping my Canadians, so that makes me more endeared to her more. But she was already, I mean, she already caught my eye when her and Natalia were on the scene, which I think we'll talk about the end and how, you know, now this pay-per-view with her and another Canadian's paid out, which is completely hilarious.
Yes.
But I love it. I love the angle that she's going with. It's kind of almost like a Kill Bill kind of esque type of vibe. So I'm here for it. The dominance is great, and it's one of those things, and I guess this is where video games come into play. It's one of those things where you would want to see her up against, you know, somebody that's on the main roster, but that person's already kind of like, you know, on their way out. It's just kind of, you know, you have there's so many women coming out of NXT, and there was such a bit of a gap between eras that we might not see some of these dream matches happen. So I'm hoping they're going to bring down more people from the main roster, because I definitely want to see her up against quite a few folks.
Yeah, there's definitely great promise with both of these athletes. Carmen Petrovich really stood out to me initially in that breakout tournament, and I was really impressed with what she was able to do. And of course, Jasmine Nix has really, really grown, now being under the tutelage of JC Jane. And this is ultimately going to result in a tag match that's going to be on the pre-show, which we will get into in just a little bit. That being the pre-show, of course, to NXT Heatwave. Now we get an interesting moment here. Shawn Michaels hops on to the screen to talk about this disturbance in the force that has been happening in NXT. For the last few weeks, almost months really, we have been seeing a certain Brooks Jensen literally disturb the force. He has not been right ever since, you know, the trio of he along with his partner's name is now leaving me, Josh Briggs and Fallon Henley. When they were together, it felt like, you know, Brooks Jensen had a real bit of direction. When they decided to split, everybody else seemed to do good except for him. And so he's been on the deep end, off the deep end rather. He has gone on the socials and said a lot of things. Most recently, he said he's no longer with the company. You know, he wished everybody well, and he apologized for his behavior. That behavior included interrupting the show multiple times, trying to get in the building, and he threatened the commentators on several occasions. He's tried to enter through multiple ways. Shawn Michaels tried to clear the air last night and state that Brooks is still with the company, and invited Brooks to show up on NXT next week so that they could kind of hash all of this out. What do you make of this? Because of all the stories that are being told, this is the one that most are going, I don't know what I'm seeing right now. Is he really gone? Is he really here? Are they working us? We can't even tell.
The one thing that in my mind that made it feel real versus a work is when they were talking about the alcohol.
Yes.
That's not something that you take lightly.
Yes.
And so, but again, it's a catch-22, because I feel like if it were real, then they wouldn't. The WWE doesn't mention that stuff at all. Like they typically go, they kind of go radio silent. It's case by case, but I feel like yeah, that alcohol component, I think that's what really made it blurred the lines. Because I think I even sent a text message to you like, wait, is this because if they didn't say the alcohol part, then I would say this is a word. But the alcohol part, it's now like blurry. Like I don't know what to think. But on the flip side, I feel like it's kind of like a HIPAA violation or something. So, but then I don't know. It's I have no answers.
It's very challenging because, you know, this does remind me, and as I'm thinking about this, there are two things that come to mind. In WCW, where they certainly leveraged Scott Hall and his alcohol issues and brought them to TV. And in WWE, they did the same thing when it came to Hawk of the Road Warriors when he was having his drinking issues, and they brought that to TV, even to one point where, you know, he fell off the top of the stage in a very controversial moment. The challenge, I think, now is the way that NXT and WWE works. NXT especially is, if something is happening, they go with it. They are not going to give you much time to let something happen on the socials that they aren't going to address. So, you know, I don't think that they are insensitive enough to make up an alcohol story.
Right.
You understand what I mean? Like that's not one of those kinds of things that would happen. And, you know, the wrestling world is a place where, you know, it's been well documented that alcohol can be an issue for some. Substance abuse can be an issue for some. It can cause you to act erratic. And so I think this is one of those cases where we're going to be tuned in because we don't know what kind of train wreck we could potentially get next week involving Brooks Jensen. Here's what's even wilder, though. What's wilder is it feels like we're paying more attention to him now than we did his entire NXT career. And that makes this very, very interesting. And again, it's partially because real life is very intriguing to us. You know, stories for story's sake don't always attract us. But when there are always elements of truth, I think that's why the Lola Vice piece hit us this week, why the Oro Mensa piece hit us last week. And when we figure out what's going on with Brooks Jensen, who knows where this could go.
And that's the thing, because if this was for story's sake, then because there's such a blurred line, then this story is going to be a part of his career from this point on, right? And then on the flip side, if it's true, then this story is going to be part of it. So I guess either way, it doesn't. And maybe that was again. This goes back to they need to do a show as far as, you know, the writer is behind the scene and how they, because I think you're in between a rock and a hard place. Because if they decide to go with this, you know, this person now is taking on this persona that's going to be with them for the rest of their career. That's a choice that, you know, I feel like the individual would have to make. It's just like if you're an actor and you keep on taking the same type of roles, then you're putting this person into a box. Terrible analogy, but you kind of get what I'm saying. And then on the flip side, putting out his information and his business like that, that's always going to be a footnote in his story. So it's I don't know.
It's all very interesting. And again, a lot of it would not have been said had we not had this erratic behavior, not just on television, but on social media. I mean, he literally accused WWE of, you know, locking up his socials and all of the things that he said. It's wild. It's really, really wild. So we'll see what comes of this. From there, NXT ended with a contract signing, a fatal four-way contract signing for this main event involving the main event Heatwave involving Trick Williams defending the NXT championship against Javon Evans, also Sean Spears, and Ethan Page. What was interesting to me about this is it's the first contract signing I can remember seeing without an authority figure present. So there was no Ava as a general manager, no Shawn Michaels, no Booker T. All this was these four men out here signing a contract, talking smack, and obviously it would get physical as it did. Who do you think came out of this contract signing / conversation looking the strongest?
I think because it really does feel like we're in the Trick Williams era. Mm-hmm. And I always get nervous when it's a fatal four-way, because it's just like anybody can get pinned and it's not even your doing and you lose your championship. Mm-hmm. But I especially with CW coming, I think, was it in September?
October 1st is when
October 1st, CW in the works. I feel like Trick, especially everything that he's gone through, you know how you might have something for a long period of time and you kind of get lazy, not lazy, but you get used to being champion. And so then you automatically think that, it's just going to happen again. And I don't think he's there. I think he very much is still like, I worked hard for this. I remember working hard for this. I'm not going to lose it. Now, October 1st, November 1st comes around, it might be a little bit different. But I think he's still riding high and still remembering like what it took to get to this point. And I think he'll be any means necessary to maintain it. And that will include essentially keeping his head on a swivel and making sure that nobody pins anybody except for him pinning somebody.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, interestingly enough, and Cousin Ron kind of took my answer here. I think Javon Evans came out of this. He came out of this looking very, very strong. I think the way he was able to handle himself against the two veterans of Shawn Spears and Ethan Page was pretty amazing. And again, just watching this 20-year-old have this level of poise to be able to respond in the way that he did and hold his own against these veterans is game changing. It's pretty amazing to really see it. And so, win or lose, the fact that Javon Evans' first PLE is in the main event says an awful lot about where he could go. Could this be time for Shawn Spears or Ethan Page? I have a very interesting thought. And my thought is it may not happen at Heatwave, but I think Trick Williams is going to lose that title before we get to the CW. And that debut episode could feature Trick Williams in the title match, in the chase to regain the title and have a major moment as the debut on the CW. Now, who he could lose it to could get very interesting. And Ethan Page, who is well hated, that's a possibility. A Shawn Spears, that's a possibility. My man from Gallus, that's a possibility. I mean, there are some real possibilities, but I think, Trick Williams will be the flag bearer of NXT during the CW era, but I don't know that he's going on October 1st as the champion. Think about that as we gear up, of course. Oh, go ahead.
Here's the thing, though. Here's the thing. I get what you're saying, but you're coming from a perspective of all the characters, right? To me, CW, you're going to be debuting it to a lot of people who might not know all the characters. And I think that's what they're banking on. They're going to get a whole new audience. And with that, you want the establishing. Well, I guess to your point, it would really be on how they present him. And if that's the case, I would almost reverse it and he loses that. And then now you spend the first part of the CW, him chasing it. So now people are seeing that ride. But I mean, you and Cousin Ron are, I guess, in alliance together. So I guess we'll go with what you guys said.
Trick the Chaser has a better edge. I mean, I think that's the thing. Watching him chase, we know how it felt watching that chase to the NXT title for Trick. I mean, again, the rafters were literally shaking. So I think it said a lot about Trick. All right, we're going to hurry this along because WWT Live is on the way. So a quick preview because Heatwave is coming up this weekend. Again, Money in the Bank weekend in Toronto, SmackDown on Friday.
It's actually Toronto, not Toronto. If you say Toronto, then I know you've never been to Toronto and you don't know somebody from Toronto. However, you actually are speaking to, I thought we were friends. You're speaking to somebody from Toronto and it's Toronto. Just a soft O. Toronto, not Toronto. There's no toe. We're not talking about anybody's body parts. Just Toronto.
All right.
Just saying.
NXT Heatwave from
in
Toronto.
No.
Toronto. So the T is silent.
Yes.
Toronto.
That
doesn't even. Okay. Well. Oh, we have another hour together.
Do you want to be a part of the Canadian team, or do you want to be the outsider looking in?
Guys, y'all have to understand how funny this is. Oh my God, this is funny. All right. So several matches will take place, including a tag team title match where Axiom and Nathan Fraser will defend against Chase U. We'll also see the NXT Women's North American Championship. Kaylani Jordan defends against Sol Ruka. The Men's North American Championship sees Obafemi against Wes Lee. And if Wes Lee loses, he can never get another shot at the NXT North American Championship as long as Obafemi is the champion. On the women's side, the women's title match will see Roxanne Perez and Lola Vice. And of course, a fatal four-way for the NXT Championship. All of this goes down this Sunday for NXT Heatwave in Toronto.
Yes!
Toronto. There we go. So, yeah, this is great. Now, I don't want to do an official sign-off because I'm trusting that most of you guys are going to hang out with us in the next 10 minutes for WWT Live. So go get yourself a beverage, something as a quick snack. We don't need to do an official sign-off because we're coming right back. I think, can I twist TK's arm to join us for WWT Live? No shade. They haven't seen you on WWT Live in
now that I have my multi-screen, I'm going to see if we can have another special guest. Hey, are you available?
Oh boy. So we're trying to get guests on. So we're going to shut this down so we can bring up WWT Live. But of course, make sure you're checking out NXT every Tuesday night on USA. And if you missed that, you can always check the full replay on Peacock the next day. Also, a big shout out to our friends at All Caribbean Wrestling, who are our sponsor here. And we've got some great stories to tell you about All Caribbean Wrestling on WWT Live, which is coming up next. So hang tight.
Oh, here's a teaser. The teaser is I found some information about the professor that I will be sharing on WWT Live that you don't want to miss.
I don't know what this is about. And I don't. Okay. Oh boy. Here we go. So needless to say, you guys hang out with us. We'll be talking about quite a bit, including all that happened this weekend at Baja Bash and All Caribbean Wrestling. And a piece of news that you guys probably don't know because we didn't tell you here on WWT Live. So we'll tell you on WWT Live in the next couple of minutes. So stick tight. We'll be back in about 10 minutes. But for everybody else joining us, thank you for rocking with us. We'll be back for WWT Live shortly. Until then, this is Women's Wrestling Talk, the #1 women's wrestling network on the planet.
Thanks for joining WWT. Don't forget to like us on all social media platforms at wwtalkpod. Like and subscribe on all video and audio platforms like yesterday, my G. And check out our website at www talkpod.com. Thanks for watching Women's Wrestling Talk, the #1 women's wrestling network